There are people who don't arrive late to their lives, they just arrive later than the expectations of others. This series of stories is not about success. It is not about moving fast or going far. It simply records the people who have lived long enough with responsibility to understand that there are choices that do not need applause. They did not appear at the right time, but they stayed at the right moment. If you have ever felt like you were moving slowly, ever felt like you were standing outside the race, or ever had to choose to stay when you could have walked away, perhaps you will recognize yourself somewhere in these stories. Episode 1. Those WHO did not appear at the right time. There is a strange thing I've noticed. The people in this series never appear at the right time in the sense that the world expects. They don't arrive when they are young. They don't arrive when they are strong. They don't arrive when everything is opening up. They arrive when it is already late. Later than their friends. Later than expectations. Late for even the dreams they once thought were their own. The soldier returns when the war is over. But in his head, it isn't. The father stays home while others are still climbing the career ladder. The man fails financially while everyone else is showing off their achievements. The second-generation immigrant starts over at 40, long after others have settled. None of them stand on a high platform. They stand very low, in places where the lights don't shine. And I realized, maturing late is not because they are slow, but because they carry things on their shoulders that they could not set down at the right time. There are responsibilities that do not choose their timing. It comes, and whoever stays carries it. Episode 2. Quiet responsibility. None of these people call what they do a sacrifice. They don't like that word either. The one caring for elderly parents doesn't see themselves as noble. The one who stays in a poor town doesn't think they are kind. The single mother raising an autistic child simply thinks, if I don't do it, who will? They don't say much, because speaking out sounds like complaining, and silence hurts less. There are days they feel inferior to everyone. Inferior to friends who have gone far. Inferior to those who live lighter lives. Inferior even to the version of themselves they once dreamed of. But the next morning, they still wake up, still do the same things as yesterday. No one applauds. No one notices. I think that is a very quiet form of maturity. It doesn't make one better. It just makes one not run away. Episode 3. Arriving late, but not in the wrong place. Sometimes I wonder, if they could start over from the beginning, would they choose differently? No one answers that question, because they know, life doesn't give do-overs. But I see one thing clearly. Each of them stood in the right place at the right moment where if they had left, there would be a void that no one could fill. They didn't save the world. They didn't change society. They didn't leave a great legacy. They just stayed, when others needed them, when there were no other choices. And perhaps, maturing late is not about arriving late. It is about moving slowly long enough so as not to leave anyone behind. Episode 4. Those WHO no longer need to be understood. When a person lives long enough with responsibility, they will gradually stop wishing for others to understand them. The soldier no longer explains why he stays home to care for his child. The man who failed financially no longer tells of the years he once had everything. The single mother no longer speaks of the nights of exhaustion. The second-generation immigrant stops mentioning unfinished dreams. The man who stayed in the poor town no longer justifies why he never left. It's not because they are stronger, but because they have understood. There are choices that, if explained long enough, only make you more tired. They begin to live with a different kind of silence. Silence that isn't about enduring, but about accepting. Accepting that their life will never be fully retold. Accepting that there are parts only those on the inside can understand the price of. There are very long evenings. No incidents. No climax. Just sitting down, breathing slowly, and knowing you are still here. I think that is when maturing is no longer about trying, but about stopping in the right place and not needing to go further to prove anything. Episode 5. Arriving late, but for others. When looking back at this entire series of stories, I don't see people who arrived late. I only see people who arrived at the right time, for someone else. The soldier arrived at the right time when his child needed a sober father. The man who failed financially arrived at the right time when his family had no other support. The single mother arrived at the right time when the child needed a safe enough world. The second-generation immigrant arrived at the right time when he himself could no longer run away. The man who stayed in the poor town arrived at the right time when his mother had no one else by her side. They didn't choose a beautiful timing. Timing chose them. And perhaps, that is what few people say when talking about maturity. Not everyone gets to grow up for themselves. Some people must grow up to be there in time for someone else. They carry no titles, no need to be named, no hope of being remembered. They just keep living, day after day, in choices that are not loud. And when everything passes, what remains is not achievement, but a very quiet peace when knowing you did not abandon anyone when they were needed most. If you have stayed until this part, perhaps you are not watching these stories for entertainment. Maybe you see somewhere someone like yourself, or a part of a life you once went through, or a choice you have never told anyone. This video series does not try to answer the question of how to live correctly, nor does it want to advise you whether to go or to stay. We only tell of those who have lived long enough with responsibility to understand that there are decisions that do not need applause. If while watching, you were silent for a little longer, breathed a beat slower, or remembered someone whose name you haven't called in a long time, then perhaps we have met in the right place. Thank you for not rushing, for staying, and for accompanying these quiet stories until the very end. I used to think I arrived late. Only later did I understand. There are people who arrive at the right time, for others.